I forgot my phone on the table after a family dinner, and that small mistake was the last ordinary thing I did before my life split cleanly in two. Before I tell you what happened next, let me tell you who I was before that night. My name is Eleanor Whitfield, and for more than 30 years, my hands and eyes were trusted with things most people never notice until they are gone. I am an architectural conservator. I restore historic buildings the way surgeons restore bodies, carefully, patiently, honoring every original line and hidden weakness. I spent my life protecting structures others were eager to replace, proving that preservation is not nostalgia, but responsibility. That evening was supposed to be a celebration. My son Nathan insisted on it. He chose the restaurant, an old converted library with vaulted ceilings and soft amber lighting, the kind of place that whispers prestige. He said it was to honor my upcoming 63rd birthday and my so-called retirement discussions. His wife, Brooke, sat beside him, perfectly composed, dressed in muted elegance that somehow still felt calculated. The table was filled with delicate plates, wine decanted precisely, voices low and respectful. To anyone watching, it looked like a loving family honoring a matriarch. But from the moment I sat down, something felt wrong. Not loud wrong, quiet wrong, like a building with a hidden crack that only the trained eye can sense. My vision had been troubling me for months. Subtle at first. Blueprints blurred at the edges. Depth felt unreliable. I told myself it was fatigue, age, long nights squinting over drawings. Still, that night, the room seemed to tilt ever so slightly, as if the floor itself could not be trusted. "Mom, you look tired," Nathan said gently, reaching across the table with concern practiced to perfection. "You should really slow down. You have nothing left to prove." Brooke nodded in agreement, her smile soft but persistent. "You built something incredible, Eleanor. But it might be time to let go. Stress is terrible for your condition." My condition? They had started using that word recently, like a diagnosis that excused every suggestion they made next. They spoke of responsibility, of protecting me, of how difficult it must be to work when your eyesight begins to fail. They spoke of retirement as relief, of legal paperwork as convenience, of signing authority over as an act of love. Nathan said he only wanted to help, that he would never change my legacy. I listened. I nodded. Inside, something heavy pressed against my chest. I had built my firm from nothing. I had fought developers, councils, corporations. I had preserved schools, courthouses, churches, places where memory lived in stone. And now, sitting under polite lighting with my own family, I felt reduced to an obstacle that needed to be gently moved aside. Maybe they were right, I thought. Maybe I was becoming a liability. The last restoration proposal I reviewed had taken me longer than usual. I had missed a minor measurement error and corrected it later, but the doubt lingered. Doubt is dangerous. It corrodes faster than rust. I agreed to consider the paperwork. I said we would discuss it soon. The relief on their faces was immediate and unmistakable. It stung more than any argument would have. When dinner ended, I stood carefully, steadying myself against the chair. Nathan offered to walk me out, but I declined. I needed air. I needed distance from the table, from the quiet victory glowing in their eyes. Outside, the night felt hollow. The street smelled like rain on old stone, though I barely registered it. I reached into my bag to call a car. My phone was gone. I sighed, irritated with myself, and turned back toward the entrance. The restaurant was quieter now, chairs stacked, lights dimmed. As I stepped inside, a strange stillness settled over me, thick and expectant. That was when I saw the waitress looking straight at me, her face pale, her eyes wide with urgency. And before I could ask a single question, she moved toward the door and locked it behind me. Everything I thought I knew ended right there. The sound of the lock clicking into place was soft, almost polite, but it echoed inside my chest like a gunshot. I turned toward the door instinctively. "Excuse me," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "I just need my phone. I'm leaving." The waitress did not move. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with dark hair pulled back too tightly and hands that trembled despite her effort to appear calm. Her name tag read Mara. She swallowed hard and glanced toward the dining room, then back at me. "Please," she whispered. "You have to trust me. I wouldn't do this if it wasn't serious." My heart began to race. Every professional instinct I had learned over decades told me this was wrong. A locked door. A stranger asking for trust. But there was something in her eyes that stopped me from pushing past her. Fear, yes, but not for herself. For me. "I don't feel well," I said quietly. "If this is a joke, it's in very poor taste." "It's not a joke," she replied. "I saw something, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. But I need you steady. Promise me you won't faint." The word faint felt like an insult. Still, the room swayed slightly, as if to mock my pride. I nodded once. Mara led me quickly through a narrow corridor behind the bar, past shelves of glassware and linen carts, into a small staff room that smelled faintly of detergent and burnt coffee. Against one wall stood a desk with a security monitor glowing dimly. She closed the door behind us and lowered her voice even further. "This camera covers your table, the one above." I wasn't supposed to look, but I did. Because something felt wrong. She tapped the keyboard, the screen flickered, then settled into grainy black and white footage. I recognized the angle instantly. It was us. My table. My dinner. The timestamp read 23 minutes earlier. I watched myself stand up from the chair, adjust my jacket, and walk out of frame toward the restroom. My posture looked older than I felt, slightly unsteady, vulnerable. My throat tightened. Then the moment I had left the frame, everything changed. Nathan leaned back in his chair. The warmth drained from his face like water down a sink. He scanned the room quickly, not with concern, but calculation. Brooke shifted closer to him, angling her body to block the table from view. My son reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. I leaned forward without realizing it. He pulled out a small vial, clear, slim, not something you'd mistake for medication. He twisted the cap with practiced ease and tilted it over my wine glass. "Just a few drops. Efficient. Careful." Brooke laughed, not loudly, just enough to show pleasure. My breath caught. My fingers dug into the edge of the desk to keep myself upright. On the screen, Nathan slid the vial back into his pocket and lifted my glass slightly, swirling it, as if admiring the color. He said something. Mara reached forward and turned on the audio. "She thinks it's age," Nathan's voice said, casual and amused. "The doctors say stress. Perfect cover." Brooke snorted softly. "How long until she can't see straight at all?" "Couple more weeks if she keeps drinking it," he replied. "Then she'll sign anything." I felt the room fold inward. My ears rang. My knees buckled, and I sank down onto the cold linoleum floor, my back against the cabinet, my breath coming in short, broken gasps. My son. My child. The boy whose homework I checked by lamplight, whose hands I held crossing busy streets. On the screen, Nathan mimicked a tremor, exaggerating it, mocking my unsteady hands. Brooke wiped tears of laughter from her eyes. They were not worried about me. They were enjoying my collapse. Mara dropped to her knees beside me, her voice shaking. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know who you were at first. But no one deserves this." I couldn't answer. I couldn't scream. I could only stare at the screen as the truth carved itself into me, clean and irreversible. The dinner had never been a celebration. It had been a rehearsal for my erasure. For a long moment, I stayed on the floor, my back pressed against the cold metal cabinet, my breath shallow and uneven. The image on the screen had burned itself into my mind, replaying over and over without mercy. Betrayal has weight. It presses down on your chest until every breath feels borrowed. Mara knelt beside me, unsure whether to touch me or not. Her hands hovered in the air, trembling almost as much as mine had been at the table. "I should call someone," she said softly. "An ambulance. Or the police." "No." The word came out sharper than I expected. I closed my eyes and forced my breathing to slow. Not yet. I needed my mind clear. Panic would only give my son exactly what he wanted. Mara hesitated. I saw conflict flicker across her face, but she nodded. "I think you should know something," she said quietly. "My father works in industrial safety, chemical exposure cases. I grew up hearing about substances that don't kill you, but make you weak, make you doubt yourself." That caught my attention. I opened my eyes and looked at her properly for the first time. She wasn't just frightened. She was certain. When I saw him pour it, she continued. I recognized the way he handled it. Too confident. That's not medicine. And it's not random. It's calculated. The room stopped spinning. Calculated. That word mattered. For months, my eyesight had been failing in patterns, not chaos. Worse at certain times of day. Worse after meals I shared with Nathan. Slight improvement when I traveled alone for work. I had blamed stress, fatigue, age. But age does not follow schedules. Poison does. A strange calm crept in, cold and focused. Like the moment before a difficult restoration when you finally identify the source of structural failure. Once you see the crack, the fear changes shape. It becomes solvable. "I am not dying," I said aloud, more to myself than to her. Mara looked at me, startled. "What, I'm not losing my sight, naturally? This is not decline. This is interference." The word tasted bitter, but it also grounded me. I pushed myself up slowly, testing my balance. The weakness was still there, but now I understood it. Understanding changes everything. "Thank you," I said to Mara, meeting her eyes. "What you did tonight may have saved my life." Her lips pressed together. "I just couldn't let you walk out not knowing." They were laughing. I kept thinking, if that were my mother. I reached into my bag, pulled out my wallet, and handed her several bills. She started to protest, but I shook my head. "This is not payment for silence," I said. "This is gratitude. But I need one thing from you. Anything." You saw nothing. I forgot my phone. I came back, picked it up, and left. If anyone asks, that is the entire story. Mara nodded without hesitation. "I promise." I took my phone from the desk where she had placed it and walked toward the back exit. My legs felt heavy, but my spine was straight. When the cool night air hit my face, it felt different now. Sharper, real. I did not cry on the way home. Grief would come later. Right now, I needed control. At home, the house was silent. too silent. Nathan and Brooke would not return until late. I did not go to my bedroom. I went to my studio, the room where I kept my earliest drawings and tools, where every surface carried the weight of memory and precision. I sat at my drafting table and stared at my hands. They were steady, not because the poison had left my system, but because fear had. They thought they were dismantling me. In truth, they had done something far more dangerous. They had awakened me. And for the first time since my vision began to blur, I understood with perfect clarity that my greatest threat was no longer time. It was trust. The studio was the only room in the house that never felt unfamiliar, no matter how long I stayed away from it. Even in the dim light of early morning, it welcomed me with a quiet honesty the rest of the world lacked. Drafting tables stood exactly where I had left them. Rolled plans rested in their slots. Shelves of notebooks and glass slides lined the walls, each one labeled in my own careful hand. This room had never lied to me. I locked the door behind me and turned on the overhead lamp. Its white light cut through the shadows and settled over the table like a surgeon preparing for an incision. Whatever my son had put into my body, it had come from a place of calculation, which meant it would leave traces. At the bottom of my bag, wrapped in a napkin, was the wine glass coaster I had absent-mindedly taken from the restaurant. A faint red stain marked its edge where the glass had sweated. I placed it gently on the table as if it were evidence in a trial. Years ago, before I ever touched historic stone or timber, I had trained in material degradation analysis. Light, pressure, chemicals. Buildings fail for reasons. So do bodies. I retrieved a small, portable optic analyzer from a locked drawer. Old equipment, reliable. I scraped the faint residue from the coaster into a sample slide, added a neutral solvent, and positioned it beneath the lens. My breath slowed as I adjusted the focus. The pattern appeared almost immediately. It was not alcohol alone. There was a secondary compound present, synthetic, structured, deliberately engineered. I ran the test twice, then a third time to be certain. The results did not change. A temporary optic nerve suppressant, not permanent damage, not degenerative disease. A controlled disruption of visual processing designed to mimic natural decline. Enough to cause doubt. Enough to erode confidence. Enough to make a woman surrender her life's work willingly. I sat back in my chair, the truth settling over me with chilling clarity. Nathan had not wanted me dead. He wanted me obedient. I closed my eyes and let the anger rise, then settle. Rage was a blunt tool. I needed something sharper. If the compound was temporary, that meant timing mattered. Exposure had to be repeated, carefully maintained. And if exposure stopped, recovery would follow, which meant I still had leverage. I checked the clock. 6:30 in the morning, too early to act, too early to confront, but not too early to plan. I picked up my phone and stared at my son's name on the screen. For a moment, I hesitated. Then I pressed call. I let my voice shake when he answered. I let panic seep into every word. "Nathan," I whispered. "I can't see properly this morning. It's worse. Everything feels dim." I tried to read my notes, and I couldn't make sense of them. There was a pause, just long enough to hear his satisfaction, hiding behind concern. "Mom," he said gently, "this is exactly why we talked about stepping back. Stress makes it worse." I swallowed hard, letting my silence speak. "I don't want to fight it anymore," I said. "I don't want to keep pretending I'm fine." Another pause. This one shorter. "We can bring the paperwork today," he said. "No need to wait. You should rest." "Yes," I replied. "Please. Today." I ended the call before he could say anything else. The bait was set. I spent the next hours cleansing my system as best I could. Water from sealed bottles. Plain food. Steam compresses over my eyes the way I had learned long ago to relieve chemical exposure. I did not expect miracles. I needed only enough clarity to execute what came next. Then I moved through the house methodically. I emptied my kitchen of anything Nathan or Brooke had touched during their visits. Teas, supplements, bottles of oil, even the honey jar she liked to stir into my drinks. Everything went into the trash. In the guest room, tucked inside a drawer beneath folded scarves, I found what I had half expected. Small vials, clear liquid, identical to the one I had seen on the screen. My hand tightened around the glass until it nearly cracked. This had never been about care. It had been about control. And now that I knew the truth, the studio behind me seemed to hum with quiet approval. The tools were ready. So was I. I stood in the guest room longer than necessary, the small glass vial heavy in my palm. It was warm from my skin, deceptively harmless in appearance. If I had not seen the footage, if I had not trusted the instincts that years of careful work had sharpened, I might have mistaken it for medication or dismissed it entirely. That was the point. I placed the vial on the desk and began to search the room properly. No longer as a homeowner tidying after visitors, but as an investigator cataloging a crime scene. I moved slowly, deliberately. Every drawer, every cabinet, every space where familiarity could hide intent. The second discovery came from my bathroom cabinet. Nathan had brought me a box of eye supplements weeks earlier, smiling the way sons do when they believe they are being dutiful. "For your vision, Mom." Doctor recommended. I remembered feeling oddly grateful at the time. Now, I turned the bottle in my hands and frowned. The label sat imperfectly. One corner lifted under my fingernail far too easily. I peeled it back. Beneath the cheerful branding was another mark, printed directly onto the original container. Minimalist. Stark. A symbol I recognized immediately. It belonged to Meridian Developments. My stomach dropped. Meridian was not a pharmaceutical company. It was a ruthless real estate conglomerate known for acquiring protected properties, draining them of legal status, and leveling them for profit. I had blocked 3 of their major projects over the years, invoking preservation clauses and historical designations they despised me for. This was not coincidence. I continued searching, my pulse steady but cold. In a storage drawer behind spare linens, I found a small cardboard box. Inside were more vials, identical in size and shape, each one marked with tiny etched codes. This was not opportunistic poisoning. It was supply. It was planning. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the weight of realization pressing into my spine. Nathan had not acted alone. He had been enabled, supported, equipped. Meridian did not just want my company. They wanted me gone. My firm had been the last barrier between them and a string of historically protected sites. Churches, schools, civic halls, buildings that could not be demolished as long as I held authority. If I stepped aside, those protections would crumble within weeks. They were using my son as leverage, or worse. I returned to the studio and laid everything out neatly on the table. The vial, the altered supplement bottle, photographs taken with my phone. Evidence demanded order. My mind replayed the dinner. Nathan's impatience. Brooke's smiles, their eagerness to accelerate the signing. It all aligned now. They weren't waiting for my decline. They were engineering it. The phone on the counter buzzed. Nathan's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring once, twice, then answered. "Mom," he said, his voice lighter than it should have been. "Brooke and I will be there around 2. Is that okay?" "Of course," I replied, allowing my voice to soften. "I'll be here. I'm not going anywhere." When the call ended, I allowed myself one long breath. The betrayal was no longer personal alone. It was ideological, ethical. They were not just dismantling me. They were erasing decades of protection, of memory, of care, and they believed I was too weak to stop them. I began preparing the house for their arrival, not as a place of surrender, but as a stage. I practiced the tremor in my hands until it looked convincing. I let my shoulders slump. I placed papers in disarray where they would expect confusion. Every movement was deliberate. They wanted a frail woman. I would give them one. And while they watched her fall, they would never notice the ground shifting beneath their feet. The sound of tires crunching against the gravel driveway reached me before the doorbell rang. I was already seated in the living room, wrapped in an old wool shawl, my posture slightly bent, my gaze unfocused. I had chosen this room carefully. It held just enough light to exaggerate weakness, just enough shadow to hide clarity. When Nathan and Brooke entered, they did so with the confidence of people who believed the outcome was inevitable. Nathan carried a leather folder pressed firmly against his side. Brooke followed with a bakery box tied in a neat ribbon, her expression composed and almost celebratory. "Mom," Nathan said loudly, as if volume alone might compensate for empathy. "How are you feeling?" I blinked twice before answering, letting the pause stretch. "Oh, Nathan. You're here already. I must have lost track of time." Brooke stepped closer and set the box on the table. "We brought you something sweet. You should keep your energy up." I leaned forward slightly, squinting at the box, as though trying to identify it by shape alone. Is that the vanilla cake I like? I can't tell anymore. Everything smells wrong lately. They exchanged a glance. It was quick, but I saw it. Nathan cleared his throat. "That's normal. The doctor said distortions happen when the nerves are stressed. It doesn't mean anything serious." I nodded, clinging to the words like a frightened child clings to reassurance. "If you say so. I trust you." That sentence did something to him. I watched his shoulders relax. Trust was the currency he had been waiting to collect. He opened the folder and placed it on the table. "We just want to get this over with so you can rest. You don't need to read everything again. It's all exactly what we discussed." My hand trembled as I reached for the pen. I let it wobble dramatically between my fingers. Oh dear, I'm so clumsy today. Brooke leaned in, her voice soft and syrupy. "It's okay. Just take your time." I lowered the pen toward the page, then gasped softly as if startled by my own movement. My elbow struck the glass water pitcher sitting beside the papers. It tipped. Water spilled across the documents in a sudden clear flood. Ink bled instantly. Signatures blurred. Official seals warped and dissolved before our eyes. "Oh no!" I cried, standing abruptly and knocking my chair back. "I ruined it. I ruin everything these days." Nathan's face flushed red before he caught himself. For a brief second, anger flared too bright to hide. Then it vanished. "It's fine," he said tightly. "We can print another copy." I shook my head, wringing my hands. "The notary is probably closed now. I'm so sorry. I wanted to do this right." Brooke inhaled sharply, then smiled. "Maybe it's for the best. You shouldn't be rushed." I looked up at them. eyes watery and earnest. The Preservation Council meets in 2 days, doesn't it? That big session you mentioned, where everyone will be there? Nathan hesitated. I could sign it there, I continued. In front of everyone. That way, no one can say you pressured me. Everyone will see I gave you everything willingly. Silence settled between us. Then Nathan nodded slowly. Yes, that makes sense. Public is safer. Relief flickered across Brooke's face. They believed the delay worked in their favor. Nathan stepped outside to take a call, saying he needed air. Brooke sat scrolling on her phone, her attention drifting as soon as I looked away. I rose slowly and shuffled toward the hallway, pretending to head upstairs. Instead, I stopped just short of the landing and turned quietly toward the window overlooking the garden. Nathan's voice carried clearly from the patio. She's worse than we thought, he said, his tone smug. Could barely hold the pen. She'll sign at the council meeting. No problem. A distorted voice answered through the speaker. Good. Once it's done, proceed immediately. Nathan laughed. We won't waste time. The permits will move fast. By the time she realizes anything, it'll all be gone. I stepped back from the window, my heart steady and cold. They thought the performance was over. They had no idea it was just beginning. I did not sleep that night. I sat at the small desk in my bedroom, the lights off, the house silent around me, replaying Nathan's words until they lost all emotion and became pure information. Permits. Immediately. Gone. He was not planning a transition. He was planning an erasure. Just before dawn, I made the call I had been avoiding. Daniel answered on the second ring. Eleanor. He sounded surprised. It's early, I know, I said. I need you to trust me, and I need you now. There was a pause. Then, I'm on my way. Daniel Mercer had been my partner long before Nathan ever showed interest in my work. A structural historian, meticulous and stubborn, he understood one thing better than anyone else. Documents outlive people. If you protect the paper, you protect the truth. An hour later, we were driving north, away from the city, toward a stretch of land most maps no longer bothered to label. The fog was thick, wrapping the road in quiet anonymity. I didn't explain much, only that my son had betrayed me and that my life's work was at risk. Daniel didn't ask questions. He never did when something mattered this much. We stopped in front of a neglected municipal archive building slated for closure years ago. The sign was faded, the parking lot empty. To anyone else, it looked abandoned. I unlocked the side door with a key I had carried on my ring for 20 years. Inside, the air smelled of dust and aging paper. We descended 2 levels underground, past rows of inactive shelves and sealed cabinets. At the very back, behind a false wall, I entered a code and pressed my palm against a cold metal plate. The wall slid open. Daniel exhaled slowly. Eleanor, what is this? This is the reason Sterling survived every hostile takeover attempt for 3 decades, I said, and the reason Nathan will fail. Inside was a vault. Not money, not jewels. Deeds. Original restoration charters. Preservation covenants. Addendums signed in ink that still carried legal force. Every building my firm had protected was represented here with clauses embedded so deeply that no public transfer of authority could dissolve them. I handed Daniel a folder. Contingency authority. If I am declared incapacitated or coerced, all rights revert to the Preservation Trust, which I control, alone. He flipped through the pages, his eyes widening. You never told the board about this. I never told anyone, I said. Not even Nathan. Daniel closed the folder carefully. They can't touch the sites, no. And if they try, I continued. Their attempt becomes criminal interference with protected heritage. I placed the vial and the altered supplement bottle on the table. This makes it conspiracy. Daniel looked up at me, something like pride in his eyes. They think you're fragile. I allowed myself a thin smile. They think age made me weak. In truth, it taught me where to hide the foundations. By the time the sun rose, we had copies secured in 3 locations, legal counsel alerted, and contingency notices prepared. When Nathan arrived at the council meeting the next day, confident and impatient, he would walk into a room where every exit had already been sealed. He just didn't know it yet. The council chamber was already full when I arrived. Long wooden tables, microphones neatly aligned, nameplates polished to a dull shine. People who had known me for decades nodded politely as I passed, their expressions a mixture of respect and concern. Word had traveled quickly. Eleanor Whitfield was stepping down. Or so they believed. Nathan sat near the front with Brooke beside him, both dressed for victory. He stood when he saw me, offering his arm with exaggerated care. I ignored it and walked on my own. My vision was clear. Not perfect, but honest. Grounded. Enough. When my name was called, I rose slowly, allowing the room to settle into silence. This was the moment they had prepared for. The public surrender. The signature that would unlock everything. Nathan slid the folder toward me, the new documents pristine, the pen placed carefully on top. "Take your time, Mom," he said softly, for everyone to hear. I looked at the paper. Then I looked up. "Before I sign anything," I said calmly, "there is something I need to share with this council." Nathan stiffened. Brooke's smile faltered. I nodded to the clerk at the side of the room. "Please play the footage." The screen behind the council lit up. Grainy black and white images filled the chamber. My table at the restaurant. Me standing up, leaving. Then my son reaching into his jacket. The vial. The pour. The laughter. A murmur rippled through the room like a sudden wind. "Turn on the sound," I said. Nathan's voice echoed through the chamber. Clear. Smug. Unmistakable. "She thinks it's age." Brooke's hand flew to her mouth. I continued before anyone could speak. For months, my declining vision was not a medical mystery. It was chemically induced, designed to mimic age-related deterioration, temporary, reversible, and administered without my knowledge or consent. I placed the vial on the table in front of me, then the altered supplement bottle, then a folder of lab analyses and documentation. This substance was supplied by an external developer with a vested interest in dismantling historic protections I personally enforced. Gasps. Whispers. Chairs shifted. Nathan stood abruptly. "This is absurd. She's confused. She's been unwell." I met his eyes. "I am unwell," I said evenly, "from betrayal." I turned back to the council. In anticipation of coercion, decades ago I placed all protected site authority into a private preservation trust. Any attempt to transfer or liquidate assets under duress activates immediate reversion and criminal review. I nodded to Daniel, seated at the far end of the chamber. He stood, holding the documentation high. "This meeting," I continued, "is now evidence." Security moved quickly. Phones were confiscated. Officials whispered urgently into radios. Nathan's confidence collapsed in real time. His voice cracked as he tried to speak again, but no one was listening. Brooke stared at me, eyes wide, finally understanding the scale of what she had gambled. By the time the council recessed, authorities were waiting. Nathan did not look back as he was escorted out. I did not reach for him. Some losses do not deserve mourning. Weeks later, my firm no longer existed in its old form. It became a non-profit trust, legally sealed against private exploitation. Every protected building remained protected, permanently. I returned to my studio not to rebuild what was broken, but to continue what had never truly been taken. I share this story not for pity, but for clarity. Because betrayal often wears the mask of concern, because age is too often mistaken for weakness, and because the most dangerous lie we are taught is that our time is over simply because others are eager to replace us. I did not survive by becoming harder. I survived by remembering who I was before anyone tried to erase me. Never surrender your voice to those who benefit from your silence. Wisdom does not fade with age. And those who rush to claim your legacy often forget one thing: you built it.